On June 14, 2025, Canada abruptly closed the Alaska Highway, not for safety, but as a political act. Concrete barriers and official vehicles blocked the only land route connecting Alaska to the rest of the United States. The border was sealed, leaving thousands of travelers stranded and supply trucks immobilized. Alaska's lifeline was severed in an instant, sparking a crisis between two of the world's closest allies. Social media filled with images of endless lines of cars and trucks at the fortified border. Families on vacation and truck drivers with perishable goods were left in limbo. Canadian officials declared the closure indefinite by order of Ottawa. The sudden move created panic and confusion, especially for Alaskans who rely on the highway for food, medicine, and essentials. Businesses faced ruin, and people needing urgent travel were trapped. The closure was a direct threat to the daily lives of nearly 750,000 Americans, turning isolation into a dangerous reality. The world watched in disbelief as a route built from wartime partnership became a tool of conflict. The immediate impact was human and severe, but the larger implications were chilling. If two friendly neighbors could resort to such measures, what did it mean for global stability? The closure was a seismic event in international relations. Geography itself had become a weapon, putting alliances everywhere at risk. The U.S. response was immediate and furious, led by former President Donald Trump. Trump took to Truth Social, calling the closure an act of war and blaming the current administration for letting relations deteriorate. His posts fueled outrage, with calls for boycotts and protests at the border. Trump's rhetoric escalated tensions, framing the crisis as a personal and national affront. In contrast, Canada's Premier Dana Chur addressed the world with calm resolve. She called the closure a painful but necessary last resort, citing years of unfair American tariffs on Canadian industries. Chur insisted all diplomatic avenues had been exhausted and demanded fair trade as a condition for reopening. The clash of leadership styles polarized both nations. In the U.S., Trump's supporters demanded retaliation, while others questioned if American policies had provoked the crisis. In Canada, Chur's stance won support. Many felt it was time to stand up for national interests. Diplomatic fallout was swift. The U.S. president condemned the closure and demanded the highway reopen immediately. Emergency talks stalled as both sides refused to budge. The war of words between Trump and Chur became a proxy for the official stalemate. Each statement hardened positions, deepening the conflict. The crisis had no clear path to resolution. The world watched as two allies became adversaries overnight. The Alaska Highway became a scene of desperation overnight. Families in RVs, caught off guard, found themselves stranded in remote areas with dwindling supplies. Small towns were overwhelmed by the influx of travelers. Hotels filled instantly, and grocery shelves emptied. For truck drivers like Mike hauling perishable goods, the closure was catastrophic. Shipments spoiled, contracts were lost, and livelihoods evaporated. The human cost was immense. People missed weddings, funerals, and critical medical appointments. Ordinary lives were thrown into chaos by a distant political decision. Communication breakdowns and spotty mobile service fueled confusion and rumors. Local authorities scrambled to provide food and shelter, but the scale was overwhelming. The highway became a long, makeshift refugee camp, all because people were in the wrong place at the wrong time. The border closure was the climax of decades of trade disputes between the U.S. and Canada. The most bitter conflict centered on softwood lumber. America accused Canada of unfair subsidies, responding with heavy tariffs. These tariffs devastated Canadian logging communities, fueling resentment. Maple syrup, a Canadian icon, became another flashpoint, with both sides accusing each other of unfair practices. Trade wars escalated under Trump, with tariffs on steel, aluminum, and retaliatory Canadian tariffs on American goods. Instability and distrust grew as each side accused the other of bad faith. Premier Chur's government felt pushed to the brink, believing Canada was bullied by U.S. economic power. Closing the Alaska Highway was a radical gamble, meant to inflict direct pain on the U.S. in a way tariffs never could. It targeted a symbol of American logistics and sovereignty. Canada signaled it would no longer accept the status quo. The closure was a desperate move in a long, bitter economic chess match. The stakes had never been higher. The world was forced to pay attention. For Sarah and Tom Jenkins, a retired couple from Oregon, the closure turned their dream RV trip into a nightmare. Stuck in a Yukon town, their budget evaporated as anxiety replaced joy. At a truck stop near Fort Nelson, Maria Flores, a single mother and trucker, watched her livelihood slip away with every passing day. "This isn't a game, this is my life," she said, echoing the fears of countless drivers. In Tok, Alaska, small businesses faced ruin as summer traffic vanished overnight. "It's like someone turned off the faucet," said a local cafe owner. The pain was felt on both sides of the border. Canadian towns lost their customers, and American businesses faced bankruptcy. Beyond economics, the emotional toll was severe. A soldier trying to reach his ailing mother was turned away at the border, forced to seek an expensive flight. The closure separated families, crushed dreams, and left deep personal wounds. The highway was no longer just a road, it was a barrier. The crisis was personal, not just political. Every stranded traveler had a story of loss. The scars would last long after the barriers were gone. The human cost was impossible to ignore. Alaska's supply chain buckled within days of the closure. Grocery shelves emptied of fresh food and prices soared as emergency air freight replaced truck deliveries. Construction projects halted, car dealerships ran out of inventory, and repair shops lacked parts. The shutdown exposed Alaska's dependence on that single highway. Air cargo costs tripled overnight, and the port of Anchorage was overwhelmed. Barges and ferries were booked solid, causing massive delays and inflation. Canadian businesses suffered too. Suppliers lost Alaskan markets, and tourism in the Yukon and British Columbia collapsed. Hotels, restaurants, and tour operators faced bankruptcy. The economic pain was mutual and severe. Ottawa's decision to exert pressure had backfired, inflicting self-harm. The crisis revealed how deeply intertwined the two economies were. The fallout was felt on both sides of the border. The Alaska Highway, built in World War II as a symbol of US-Canada unity, now stood as a wall. Its closure was a jarring betrayal of decades of friendship and open borders. Generations of travelers had seen it as a rite of passage. Now, it was a point of division. Americans realized their vulnerability and dependence on Canadian goodwill. Canadians felt uneasy using the highway as a political weapon, a break from their cooperative tradition. The emotional impact was profound. Trust was shattered. The border, once a friendly formality, became a hard line. Decades of cooperation and shared culture were damaged overnight. The highway, once a testament to partnership, now marked how quickly alliances can fracture. The scar on the North American psyche would not heal easily. The world watched the Alaska highway crisis with alarm. If the US-Canada border could close over a trade dispute, what did that mean for global stability? Smaller nations saw a new playbook, using geography as leverage against powerful neighbors. The crisis normalized the use of choke points as political weapons. Global markets grew nervous, fearing similar disruptions elsewhere. Investors worried about the fragility of cross-border supply chains. Allies urged de-escalation, fearing a weakened Western alliance. Adversaries saw opportunity in the rift. The crisis was no longer just bilateral, it was a global warning. Weeks passed and the Alaska Highway remained closed, a stark symbol of a broken alliance. The future of the US-Canada partnership hung in the balance. Trust was shattered. Even if the road reopened, the relationship was changed forever. Alaska faced an existential crisis, and Canada's gamble brought mounting self-inflicted pain. The longer the standoff, the deeper the scars. Businesses failed, jobs vanished, and ordinary people suffered. The crisis was a brutal lesson in the dangers of economic nationalism and weaponized geography. The world learned that no country is immune to the ripple effects of political brinkmanship. The fragility of global systems was exposed. Would the crisis force a new spirit of cooperation, or mark the start of a bitter rivalry? The empty highway stood as a monument to failure, a warning of how easily even the strongest alliances can break.